Alright, this time we're going to add a little bit more functionality on. We're going to be adding jumping, falling, crouching functionality to our character. We're going to have to build out the code a little bit more, modify quite a bit of stuff, swap out some things, and I'll walk you right through that. So let's go back to the character blueprint. You can select the character, right-click them, edit 2D side-scrolling character is the default name for this. So if I right-click on that, we'll be back in the blueprints. If I look at the top section here, the handle animation section, remember last time we talked about this select node right here. It's basically two options. If we are moving, play the walking animation. If we are not moving, if that's false, play the idle animation. We cannot add on more functionality because this node only holds two states. So we're going to have to create something completely separate to handle all of the other sorts of animations that we want to do, the jumping, falling, crouching, etc. So the first thing that we need to create is we need to create a file in Unreal called enumeration, or an enumerator. It's essentially going to be a list of different options that we can do in our blueprint. So let's go create one of these. So add new, blueprint enumeration. Click on the big green add new button in your content browser. Go to the blueprint section, and then you'll see enumeration. Click on that. I'm going to call this animation states. Animation underscore states, or states underscore enum for enumerator. Again, these names don't really have any sort of bearing on the functionality. It's just organizational purposes. Although we are going to be referencing these things in the blueprints, so we'll need to remember what they're called. Okay. Double click on that after you've created it. And it will open up this window for the enumerator. And it's blank right now. We need to add options for all the different actions that we want to be able to do. So click on the new button on the right side. Go ahead and click it 5 times. And let's add some actions here. Should probably call them what your actions actually are. Stay organized. So jump, falling, crouch. And then I have the original ones, the idle, and the walk. This list could be shorter, it could be much longer. Just depends on what you're trying to do. Go ahead and click the Save button, top left, and you can close this window down. We won't be going back to it. Alright, so now that we have that enumerator list created, we're going to go back to our blueprint. Remember, right-click on your character, go to Edit 2D Side-Scroller Character, and we're back in our blueprint for our character. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to create a variable that is going to reference and pull from that list, that enumerator file that we created with the jump, the falling, the crouch, the idle, and the walk. So this will be the first variable that we've created. So to do that, you need to go over to the left side of your blueprint window. And this is something that you're going to be doing a lot outside of the character, even if you're creating any sorts of variables. So you see there's a section here called variables. There's actually already one created. It looks like this is determining if the character is moving right or not. If it's not moving right, then it must be moving left. So I want you to click the plus button on the variable section here. And let's call this animation states. You can see that it's red like the previous one. That is because it is a certain type of variable. It's a Boolean variable. We don't want it to be a red variable or a Boolean variable in this case. We are going to have to change that. So with it selected, go over to the right side of your screen, your blueprint window here, in the details panel. And this is where we can change the types of variables and other sorts of parameters of it. So the first thing that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to have to change the variable type. So if I click the drop down here and go to, actually, you know what would probably be easiest? We already know what we're looking for. We're looking for the animation state, or we call it animation underscore states underscore enum. Since we know what we're looking for, we can just search for it and go right there rather than having to click through all the drop downs. So this is what I'm looking for. If you called yours something different, then it's going to be called something different, and you're kind of on your own then. But this is what I called mine when we created it in the content browser. Animation states enum. All right, now that has changed to a greenish color. Next thing I want to do is when modifying code in blueprints, you always want to click on this compile button in the top left every now and then. That just allows Unreal to run through the code and make sure you're not committing any sort of huge errors that will break things. All right, when you compile that, if you go back and look at your details for your animation states variable again, and if this disappears, just go back to the left side of the screen and select it again. It's only showing the details for the variable that you have selected, so select it. And then in the details panel, see how down here it has the default value for jump? Call me crazy, but I don't think the default state of our character should be in the midst of a jump. I think it makes more sense to have that be an idle state. So go ahead and click the drop down on animation states right there and set it to idle. And if you click that, you'll actually see all the different states that we defined in that enumerator file. So let's just set that to idle, and that should be good. I know in class we had a couple people that had this problem where it seemed like their character was always defaulting to a jump, and we were struggling to figure it out. And this is exactly why. It's because the default state of this variable was not set to idle. I'm going to compile, I'm going to save, always save. Remember Control-Shift-S will save all. Remember to save. All right, now we're going to start to lay out this code. And I'm going to grab onto these things, these nodes in the handle animation section. Just with my marquee selection, I'm going to drag them down to give myself a little bit of room to work. Maybe drag this comment up a little bit. I can always move this stuff later. Just like to stay organized. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a reference from my animation states variable into my blueprint. So if you click on your animation states variable on the left side of your screen and you drag it into your window, it's going to ask you, do you want to get it or do you want to set it? Getting the variable is just creating a reference to it. Setting the variable allows us to change it based off of incoming data. We will eventually do both. Right now we are just getting the animation state. So drag it in, get animation states. Place it somewhere around here. You can always move it. The next thing we need to do is create a switch that's going to be able to toggle between the different animations based off of certain conditions. Very much like how the select right here is toggling between idle and walking based off of the velocity of the character. So our enumerator is the file that is going to control our switch. And to create that in the blueprint here, we need to right-click, go to type in switch in the search, and just type switch, and animation, what did I call it? Animation states enum? Yeah, should pop up there. And you'll see it says switch on animation states enum. Oops. Switch animation states enum. Half the battle with this sort of stuff is just knowing what nodes to search for to do the thing that you want to do. Luckily, the functionality that we're building here maybe will be all the functionality that you need to do your games. I'm sure some people will want some custom things, but we're setting a very good base for ourselves here. All right, so we have this switch on animation states enum here. And I want to connect the reference to animation states to the little green input node on the switch itself. So we can just go and drag a wire from the green to the green. If you ever need to break the wire, you can hold down the Alt key and click on it, and it will disappear. So what this is controlling here is that whatever the animation state is, it's going to control which of these outputs is currently active. So if the animation state is jump, then it's going to kick out values from jump and ignore all the rest. If the animation state is falling, it's going to kick out from falling. If the animation state is something else, it's going to kick out of whatever the appropriate one is for that. The animation state is going to get changed based off of different conditions that we're going to eventually code here. Falling, we're going to set it up to control if we're falling or not. If the character's falling, switch the animation state to falling, and go to this switch and kick out of the falling node, and eventually we're going to play the flipbook animations for falling over here. It's all kind of a logical, linear sort of progression here, and I think it makes sense when you look at it, especially with the visual code here laid out in a nice, clean way. It allows us to follow the path logically. Okay, next thing that we need to do is we need to create a bunch of these flipbook nodes here. So this flipbook is setting if we are idle or walking. I want you to select this and copy and paste it, Control-C, Control-V. Copy and paste it 4 times, so you have 4 of them. And move things around and organize yourself a little bit if you need to. The one flipbook was connected to this sprite reference already. We're going to want to take the sprite reference and see how it's wired into the target of this flipbook. We're going to want to wire it into every target of all of these. So we can go ahead and do that now. Which flipbook are we setting? The flipbook of the sprite. If we don't set a target, it doesn't know what to put the flipbook on. All right, so all of these are wired up. Now I need to connect the output of the switch to each of the flipbooks. When we jump, we need to set the flipbook and play the animation for jumping. When we fall, we need to play the falling flipbook animation. When we crouch, we play the crouch. And when we're idle and walking, we play those. Idle and walking are both going to get plugged into the same flipbook because we're still going to leverage this code that was existing for setting the velocity and choosing between if we're walking or idle. If the velocity is greater than 0, we're walking. If not, we're idle. Those are still going to be, that's still going to be true. That's the code that we're still going to use, and both of those just get plugged into the flipbook. So you can see the walk and the idle are both plugged into this one. All right, next thing that we need to do is we need to tell the node which flipbook to play. So see this little drop down right here that says select asset? Need to tell it which flipbook asset to play. when this is true. For the jump, which is this one, we need to change this to the jump animation that we created for Mario in our content browser. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's make this one the jump. Let's make this one falling. And let's make this one the crouch. All right. So now that code's all hooked up, when the animation state is jump, come out of here, go to jump, go up here, set the flipbook, flipbook for the target sprite, set that flipbook to Mario jumping, and play that animation. That's what's going on here, and that's going to happen for all of these other things too, the falling, the crouch, the idle, and the walk. One last thing that we need to do here is we need to fill in the input on the switch for the animation states switch. So see how the input here is empty right now? This is never going to update unless it's getting a signal. And we need to take this update animation node, connect its output to the input of the switch. So just go ahead and click on the output of the update animation custom event and take it and drag it up there. You can even move this guy closer if you want to stay organized. All right. And that looks good. Let's go ahead and play it. Everything seems to be the same. That's because we've set up all the code to do the different flipbooks, but we haven't told Unreal things like what jumping actually means, what falling means, what crouching means. We haven't set any of that sort of stuff up yet. That's the next step after this. Before we do that, though, I want to move this window out of the way. Actually, I guess I'll just close this first, play it, move it out of the way. Stop, play, move it out of the way. So one thing that's really cool about the visual programming is that you get to see the direction of how things are animated, the flow of the code here. So you see this node right here, the update animation node, it's constantly kicking out a signal that's running into the switch. The switch is asking what the current animation state is. Currently our animation state is idle. Why is it idle? Because our velocity is 0. And that's kicking into setting the flipbook to be the idle flipbook. If I hit the right key on my keyboard, it's the same thing. It's constantly coming out of idle. As soon as I hook up the other functionality for the jumping and the crouching, you're going to start to see this stuff change. And you're going to see this orange line jump up to the falling, the jumping, and the crouching sections. We will do that in the next section.